Hey folks, I'm getting pretty excited here. I have my front and my back done of my Odele, and I've seamed it all together, and I've actually done the applied I-cord bind off on the neck and one of the sleeves. I'm going to show you today how to do that on one of the sleeves because I feel like that's harder than the other one to do. So if you look here, you can see I have the applied I-cord bind off on the neck right here. And then I also have it over here on this sleeve. Now it's rolling in just a little bit, but that's because I haven't blocked it quite yet. So as soon as we get to the blocking part, then it'll all lay nice and flat. So I wanted to give you a demonstration of how to pick up the stitches right along the sleeve here. So this sleeve has been seamed together. You can see I have ends that need to be woven in. I'm starting at the armpit because it's going to leave a little bit of a hole right there. And so it's easier to sew it shut when it's under the armpit and nobody's ever going to see it anyway. All right, so I have my size 3 needles here. Now I did notice that I used the size 3 needles and it was still a little tight. So I used 3 throughout the whole project, and then I used 3 for the bind off, and it was still really tight. So you might want to consider using the size 4 needle if that's what you used to knit the whole thing, and just see if that actually works for you. Mine was a little bit tight and it pulled a little bit. So, all right, so I have some yarn here attached to my ball. Now I'm going to start picking up stitches right along here. So I am supposed to pick up, let's see what the pattern says. I'm supposed to pick up 84 on the arm. Sorry. 84 on each sleeve. Now on the other sleeve, I think I got like 91 or something. So if you pick up every single row going up, then you'll have too many stitches. So I picked up 3 and then I skipped 1. So I'll show you what that looks like. Let's see. All right, so here is my seam. And if you kind of turn this on this edge, there's like a little braided edge right here. And our job is to try to get right underneath that braided edge. So I'm going to start as close to the seam as possible. Okay, so if you notice, I'm actually under 2 parts of the little braid right there. Okay, so I'm under 2 stitches. I'm not just under 1. So there's 2 pieces of yarn over my needle right there. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my loose yarn here, and I'm going to just fold a loop, and I'm going to hook the loop around the needle, and I'm going to hold on to it. And then using my left hand, I'm going to just kind of very carefully get the fabric over the tip of the needle. So now I've got 1 little stitch on there. So there's a ladder right here. There's another little piece of yarn. I'm going to skip that and go 1 to the left, and I'm going to go in the next hole. Now I'm going to drop my tail and just hold on to the ball yarn, and I'm going to pick up this one here. There's number 2. All right, I'm going to skip the next ladder and I'm going to go in the next hole. So you can see there's a ladder right there. There's a hole right there. So I'm going to go into this next hole just like this. Pull that up. Looks like that. Now I'm going to skip 1 because otherwise it's too many. So there's a ladder right here. There's a hole. You can see that hole pretty well on camera. I'm going to skip that one and go way over here to the next one and go in. And then I'm going to do 1, and then I'm going to skip the ladder right there, go into the next hole. There's number 2, and then I'm going to do the next one, which is number 3, and then I'm going to skip 1. Okay, so you get the idea. We're going to continue along this sleeve edge, and I'm going to get to the top seam, and then I'll jump back in to show you kind of how I maneuver my needles from there. All right, so I've picked up all of the stitches on the first half. So I started down here at the armpit, and now I'm at the top seam. And I actually have, you can kind of see that these are groups of 3s there where I skipped 1. So I've got 46 stitches here. So if I double 46, that's going to give me 92 if I do the same thing on the other side. So you can see that I've already done too many, but it's really, really difficult to get this just perfect when you're picking up stitches. So I always am kind of like, it's just a border on the sleeve and you don't want it to pull too tight by skipping too many. So I kind of just go with the flow sometimes. And this is a project where that's allowed. So I'm going to allow myself a few more stitches just so it looks really nice. So I'm on circular needles here and I need to start picking up stitches on the other side. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull my needle out of here. And I'm going to tuck this one a little ways in to where I just cast on, and picked up, sorry, where I just picked up the stitches, okay? So now I can turn the whole thing over like this. And now I have a free needle to start picking up here on this other side. So there's where I ended. Here's the yarn I'm using to pick up. So now I can simply insert just on this side of the seam, like right there, and I can start picking up stitches for there. So I'm going to go ahead and pick them up all on this side, and then I'll see you at the end. All right, I've just finished picking up all the stitches around the arm. So you can see here, this needle's slipping out a little bit. Let me get it in there. So you can see here that I've got my circular needle and I've got one part of the sleeve on one needle and the other side of the sleeve on the other needle. So this is the yarn I used to pick up the stitches with. I am just going to go ahead and break this yarn. Okay, so I have a tail from where I ended, and then somewhere in the middle here, I have a tail from where I started, okay? So we basically now have one separated piece of yarn that we've used to pick up all these stitches that are shown on this needle here. So the next thing we have to do is we have to do a provisional cast on your double pointed needle. So I'm using double pointed size 3. So I have some right here, and I also have a crochet hook. So what I'm going to do is show you how to do a provisional cast on using a crochet hook onto one of your double pointed needles. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to tie a slip knot in our scrap piece of yarn. Notice I am using a contrasting color. That's going to be very important. So I'm just going to make a loop just like this, but then I'm going to pass the long end through the loop. And then I'm going to pull on that long end through the loop like this until it makes a slip knot like this. Okay, now I can put my finger on it and I can pull a little bit so it's sized properly. So now I'm going to put my hook through here and tighten it up a little bit. Now I'm going to take a double pointed needle. I'm just going to grab my tail and hold it in my hand so it's out of the way so that you guys can see pretty well. So I'm going to hold my needle just like this. Okay, so my knitting needle is on top of the yarn here. So I'm going to lean across the needle and I'm going to hook around this yarn and I'm going to gently pull it through like that. Okay, now I have this yarn, my ball yarn is in front. I want to move it behind the needle just like that. And now I'm going to do it again. I'm going to lean over, I'm going to take a bite of this yarn, and I'm going to pull it through this loop like that. Then I'm going to go like that. So see, I have 2 stitches on my double pointed needle at the moment. So now I'm going to lean over, grab another one, take my yarn behind the needle, and I can lean over and grab a 4th one, yarn behind the needle. So there's the 4 stitches that I need to cast on onto my double pointed needles for my provisional cast on. So now what I'm going to do is I am just going to do a regular crochet chain here for a little while. I'm just going to simply grab the yarn and pull it through the loop, grab the yarn, pull it through the loop, etc., just like that, until I have a nice long chain. Then I'm going to pull this out, and then I'm going to take this last loop and I'm just going to pull it nice and tight, okay? So this little tail that's hanging down right here, this is what I'm going to pull at the very end of this process, and it's just going to ping, 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 pull all of these loops out, including these 4 that are on my needle right here, and it is going to leave the next few stitches that we do with the regular color exposed. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce the yarn that I'm going to be using. Okay, so I'm going to lay that here, and I'm going to use my other double pointed, and I'm just going to knit these 4 stitches with this yarn. So I'm just going to make a little loop here. I'm going to take my loop in my yarn and put it over my first stitch so that I can knit the first stitch. Then I'm going to drop my tail, and then I'm going to use the ball yarn, and I'm going to go into the next stitch. I'm going to knit that one, next stitch, knit that one, next stitch, knit that one. Perfect. Now I've knitted 4. Okay. All right. So now we're going to turn around, and now it's time to affix this to the sweater. So I'm going to knit the first 3. So I'm going to knit 1, I'm going to knit 2, I'm going to knit 3. Now, this next stitch we're going to knit together with a stitch on the sweater. So I'm just going to very carefully set this aside, and I'm going to find my first stitch on the sweater here. Okay, so I'm going to slide my needle. I'm going to do this side first. So I'm going to slide everything toward the tip of my needle. So this first stitch right here, I need to pass on to this so that I can knit these 2 at the same time. So you can see here where I've got my lone stitch, it's on my left needle. I'm just going to grab this one and scoop it off just like that to sit on that needle. Okay, then I'm very carefully going to, minding all of the mess of your other yarn, I'm going to get in here and I'm going to knit those 2 together, just like that. Okay, so now those 2 are together. Let me just see if I can zoom in a little more here so that you guys can see this. All right, so now when you do an I-cord, you never turn it over. We had to turn it over at first in order to get the first row of stitches completed. But now we're not going to turn it over. You knit it flat, and because you drag the yarn from the left side to the right side, it curls it into a tube and makes your I-cord. So now what we're going to do is we're going to, let's see, that's my tail. Here's my live yarn. I'm just going to take this needle and I'm going to slide it this direction. Okay, let me make sure this is focused properly. Give me one quick second. Okay, good. All right, great. So I'm just going to slide this needle over like this. And now I'm going to pick up my other needle and I'm going to knit across the first 3. So I'm going to find my yarn. Now, look, it is pulling, let's see if I can turn this over without unraveling this whole thing. It is pulling from the leftmost stitch all the way to the right. So that's the fancy thing that gives us our neat little I-cord. So now I'm going to knit the first one, and I always like to give it a little tug to kind of snug it up next to the stitch on the left side so it curls a little bit. So here's number 2. Here's number 3. Okay. Now it's time for me to find the next stitch. So I'm going to look over here. I'm going to use my right needle this time. So I'm going to take my right needle and I'm going to hook this stitch over like this to get it onto the double pointeds. Okay, so it's on my right needle. Now that it's there, I'm going to pass it over to the left, and that's just easier for me because I am not left-handed. So now I am going to wrap around and knit those 2 together, just like that. Okay, now I'm going to push this all the way over, and I'm going to knit 1, knit 2, knit 3. I'm going to leave this one on my left needle hanging. I'm going to scoop the next one off of the sweater, whoop, onto my right needle. I'm going to pass it over to the left needle, and then I'm going to knit these 2 together. Okay, set this one down, slide this needle all the way over, grab this needle, and knit the first 3. 1, 2, 3. Let this guy hang out. I'm going to use my right needle to slide the next one off of the needle from the sweater. There we go. Now I'm going to pass it back over to the left needle to be in line with the little orphan over there. And now we're going to knit these two together, just like that. Okay? One more time. Slide the needle over, pick it up. We're going to knit 1, 2, and 3. Leave this guy hanging here. Push it over to this side. I'm going to use my right needle to grab the next stitch off of this needle here, and then I'm going to lovingly pass it over there, and then I'm going to knit these two together just like that. Okay, so you can kind of see what's happening here. I don't want to pull any stitches off this guy, but I'm binding off this edge while making this beautiful rolled edging that's going to be around the whole side of the sweater. So let me just pull these in and I'll quickly show you what it looks like on the front side. So this is the neck. So you can see that you're binding off on the edge, but you're making this really beautiful rolled edge there. So it's a good finish to it. Okay, I'm going to keep going until I get all the way around my sleeve, and then I have my last, once I do my last knit two together, I'll still have 4 stitches on my needle. So I'll have 4 stitches where we started on the provisional cast on, and then I'll have 4 stitches left on my needle. And then we're going to talk about how to do the Kitchener stitch to graft those together. So let me speed through this and I'll be right back. All right, so I've got all the way around and I've got my 4 stitches left. And then over here on this side, I have my 4 provisional. So the first thing I want to do is cut my yarn. So this is my tail that I'm going to use to sew in with, okay? So I've cut it from, after I did my 4 stitches here, I cut the yarn. And then I have threaded a darning needle onto it, okay? So now the first thing I want to do after I've cut the thread and put the darning needle on it is I want to undo these 4 stitches, but I want to have another needle standing by here so that I can, I'll just set that guy right there, so that I can grab these when they come out. So I want to find the long chain, which is right here. And if I pull on this, it'll start to unravel the stitches, which is exactly what I want. Now, we're getting close to the actual stitches, so I'm just going to pull very carefully. Here's this tail, let's get that out of the way. I'm just going to pull very carefully, and then I'll pull my slip knot out on this end as well. And then I'm just going to pull and pull this out, and you can see it has left 4 loops. Okay, so now I want to get those on the needles like this. That's going to be my first job, is to get those on the needles. And now we've got 4 stitches on each needle, and it's time to use the Kitchener stitch in order to sew them together. So I've got my 2 needles here. Now notice the yarn I just finished knitting with, and I've cut, and I have the darning needle on it. It is attached to the needle that's in the back. I have the other needle in the front here, okay? So this is going to be my back needle. This is going to be my front needle. So there are 4 steps to the Kitchener stitch, which we're about to do. And we'll work our way through those, and there's also going to be a reference image that you can print out and use forever and ever, because it's kind of a pain to remember all of the steps. But we're going to execute steps 2 and 4 first. So I'm going to grab my darning needle. Now, step 2 says, on the front needle, we're going to insert as if to purl. So this is my front needle. This is the first stitch, so I'm going to insert as if to purl, just like that. I'm going to pull it all the way through, Okay, now it says step 4 is on the back needle. We're going to insert as if to knit. So I'm going to duck under the front needle and get to the back needle, and I'm going to pretend like I'm going to knit it with my needle, but then I'm going to pull it all the way through and tighten it up. Okay, so now that we've done our setup row, which is step 2 and step 4, we can step through all of the rows. So step 1 is front needle, first stitch, insert as if to knit. So I'm going to insert as if to knit, I'm going to pull it through, and then it says to slip the stitch off. So I'm going to pull this guy back, knock that guy off, and then kind of come forward again. All right, step 2, on the front needle, insert as if to purl, leave the stitch on. All right, insert as if to purl, I'm going to give it a little pull, leave the stitch on there. Okay, step 3, back needle, insert as if to purl. Here we go. I'm going to pull it through and then slip the stitch off. So I'm going to pull my needle, slip that guy off the edge. There we go. All right. Step number 4, in the back needle, insert as if to knit, then leave the stitch on. So I'm going to insert as if to knit, just like that. I'm going to pull, and I'm going to leave the stitch on. Now we start over with step 1 again. Notice that we're missing 1 stitch on each side. So as you step through the 4 steps, you'll decrease 1 on each side as you knit or purl them off. All right, step 1, insert. So the first 2 steps are on the front needle. So insert as if to knit. Here we go. It's getting kind of caught on everything else. Okay. Slip the stitch off, and then on the front we're going to insert as if to purl on the next one, and we're going to leave this stitch on. This one's a little tight. Let me get it in there. Okay, insert as if to purl. Oops, I'm getting it through the other piece. I'm trying not to move around too much so you guys can see what's going on. Okay, insert as if to purl, leave the stitch on. Now, step 3 and 4 are on the back needle. Insert as if to purl, slip the stitch off, insert as if to knit, I'm going to sew it right through, leave the stitch on. All right, there we go. We've got 2 left. Step 1, front needle, knit and slip. So we're going to knit it and slip it, then front needle, purl, leave. So we're going to purl and leave it. Then on the back needle, we're going to purl and slip, purl and slip. Then we're going to knit and leave. Now in our case, we only had 4 stitches to start with, so this makes it pretty darn easy. However, when you have a longer something to graft together, then this process you'll go for a little while going through all of the steps until you have 2 stitches left, which we of course do. So now, if you recall when we started, we executed steps 2 and 4 to set up. Now to finish, we're going to do 1 and 3. So step 1 is front needle as if to knit. So I'm going to get it in there, sew it through, slip the stitch off, okay, which is no more needle, yay. Then the last step we're performing is 3, and that is back needle, purl, and slip it off. So I'm going to insert as if to purl. I'm going to pull it through, and then I'm going to slip it off. All right, so let's see what we have. So I'm going to turn it around a little bit like this. Let me fix my focus here so you guys can see a little better. I'll get a little closer. Yeah. Okay, so you can see that, oh, and I've got a tail on the wrong side there. I'll just have to thread that through. But you can see that we have essentially sewn all of this together, okay? Now these loops are quite big because what happens now is you go through and you kind of grab each stitch that you sewed and you pull it like this to tighten it up. See how that's tightening those up? So it actually looks like these two pieces were knitted together. I got the last one here. Like that. Okay. And then we're going to pull that one just like that. Now, there's a little bit of a gap here, but you'll notice this is a tail of something previous. So I'm going to want to just pull all of my loose ends nice and tight on the back side. Okay, and that closes up that hole. And again, if you get a little gap here, it's pretty easy just to put your darning needle on the end of your tail back here when you weave it in and just sew that shut. But now it looks like you have a continuous piece on the edging there. And that is all there is to it. Now, the Kitchener is one of those things where you have to tell everybody that they absolutely cannot talk to you until you're done with it, because it's so hard to remember exactly which step that you're on. I was actually doing a video just before this and I lost track and I had to start all over. So even though I do it pretty often, it's just one of those things that you absolutely have to pay attention for. So now that my all of my I-cord bind-offs are done, it's time for me to block it and wear it. So please let me know if you have any questions about this process. Post in the group so that we can make sure and give you good tech support. But at this point, you guys should be done. All you have to do is block it, and then you're ready to wear it. Thanks for participating, you guys. See you soon.